the field check star.
Seems we were talking about relationships and boundaries and what's too much in relationships, and Jeremiah said it seemed like white Christians are a little more free than black Christians when it comes to purity and sex. Not necessarily saying that they're sinning more, but they just don't seem like they worry about it as much. Now I don't like the whole white church, black church, because it's more so the ratio where it makes it seem more white or it makes it seem more black. But I did grow up in what they call white churches. I didn't go to my first technically black church was the one in here in Atlanta, and I grew up in South Florida. So I grew up around white people, and even all the way up until college. And it was just there is a difference in how they handle sin issues from my experience. I don't know if this is worldwide, but I don't remember a constant focus on purity, on not getting drunk and all this kind of stuff. They just assume you are passionate about Jesus. All that stuff will handle itself. Like you act accordingly. Yeah. And I even grew up in a Baptist white church. Right. So they don't even approve of drinking. They're not too big on dancing and all that, but they still didn't emphasize it as much as I see in the black church. Now, it doesn't mean that things didn't go on. I remember when there were couples in the ministry, and I would wonder, are they having sex before marriage? I don't really know, because nobody really talks about it. Yeah. But you don't assume that they're not, that they are, though. You kind of just assume that everything's okay. And when you talk to them, because I had friends that were white and they were in my church, and they were saying, we're saving for ourselves. When they got married, they said we're both virgins, so like they're doing okay. Wow. So when I went into the black church, it seemed like they harped on no sex before marriage and all that kind of stuff a lot more. It was like a focus. No drinking was a focus. Don't ride in the car with the opposite sex because it could lead to more was a focus. It was like every week focus, and the results to me were either the same or worse than what I experienced before.
And the problem is that they are beating you over the head with things that trip them up. It's just like a stove. It's just like you tell a little kid. I mean, my mom did this to me. Hey, that stove is hot. You don't want to touch that. But eventually I touched that stove. Like she had the stove open one day. It was laying flat, and I just walked by, licked my finger, and
because you want to find out why. I really want to find out
why is it such a big deal.
So the problem is, then, is it better the way I've experienced in the black church, or is it better the way I've experienced in the white church?
I don't think you win either way. I don't think that if you ignore it, it's good, and I don't think if you really beat it over the head with someone, it's good. I just think that it's kind of a household thing, man. I think you have to raise up your children with that standard. Your parents did that with you. My parents did that with me. Jeremiah, same way. So I think that you have to almost instill that in your kids and let the church be their parent when you're not looking.
Is it because theology-wise, they're deeper than white churches? Could be deeper than black churches.
Is that what you think? Oh, well, that is an issue. Yeah. Don't ignore it. The stereotype is that the white churches are more theology. The theology is a little deeper. They're a little more head knowledge, a little more deeper into the spirit, seemingly. And black church is more emotional, more worship, more praise. Right. That element. That's the stereotype. Yeah. And it's not completely off. Because I came from white church to black church, and the key difference I noticed was the white church that I came from was very unemotional, but they were very keen on biblical truths. Like you knew the truth. Like this is the truth. Yeah. But when I went to the black church, it wasn't so much keen on the truth, but it was very keen on you have to love God with your whole heart. Yeah. You got to give everything up. You got to live out loud. You know what I mean?
And the reason why I say that is because when it comes to theology, like in a black church, at times could be like, hey, don't have sex before marriage. Right? Yeah. In a white church, and the reason why I'm saying this is because it's kind of like coming from what you talk about. In a white church, sometimes they'd be like, purity. You have to be pure. You have to be this. You know what I mean? So it's a difference between don't have sex, because don't have sex is leave room for everything else before sex. Whereas some other in a white church they may be pure, be holy, be. I mean, of course, holiness is said in the black church,
the
but
difference
pure
is the difference is that in the black church they'll talk about it in depth and they'll say, "Oh, I messed up here, I did this," but the white church they may say just be pure, but they will never talk about what actually happened in their lives.
Yeah.
So what's better?
And maybe part of the issue is that the black church isn't teaching them why sex is wrong. They just say it. They don't really say, because you don't want your relationship with Christ to be based off of a lie, or you don't want it to be based off of a half truth. But the white church could be saying, hey, love Jesus, start there, and everything else is going to work itself out, like you said.
I can imagine listening to this and being like, my church ain't like that.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
Nah, I can say that my church is like that, because I mean, my church is like that. But I mean, you know, just putting dirty laundry out there, because the person who was telling us this was dealing with it at that time. So he's like, don't have sex, don't do this, don't blah blah blah.
I don't know if that's true, but I have experienced that, where a lot of the people telling us, you know, being really hard on us in the past were people that said, yeah, when we were dating, we had sex, and then we, you know, it really threatened our relationship.
Right.
You know? So I don't want you to do the same thing. So they were being like extra judgmental towards us because they messed up. And I'm like, is that fair? I don't know.
Yeah,
but here's the core issue, because this kind of brings up what Paul said about sin, where with the law, because there was a law against a sin, it made you want to do the sin.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So are we dealing with the same issue here, where in a black church where they say, don't do this, don't drink, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that? Everybody's like, I want to know why they care about that so much. You know what I mean?
We can't really say. We really can't say just the black church, because there's some black churches that they don't mind not alcoholism, but mind alcohol. You know what I'm saying? So I would say that certain churches, and there may be some white churches that say, okay, alcohol, real strict, real strict. I would say strict versus freedom.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's what it really is.
So I would say those things do happen. Like,
so what's better, whether it's white, black? Maybe the people listening are in a church that is the opposite.
Yeah,
you know, and maybe you're in a church that's truly representative of heaven, that's completely mixed.
Yeah, multicultural.
Okay, so what's the right way to do it? Is it better to preach Jesus and holiness and all that kind of stuff and leave the details up to Jesus, or is it better to harp on all the little things to hopefully that people won't do it? Like, what's the right way to do it?
I think you have two different audiences. I think you have kids that need to hear it one way and kids that need to hear it another way. If I'm a Christian and I'm bringing my unsaved friend to church for the first time, they need to hear about Jesus. They already heard about sex stuff from their parents, maybe when they were kids or whatever. So I think you need to watch who your audience is and speak to your audience.
Okay.
But I think that's what testimonies are for. Because a testimony can always say what happened in my life previously. Yeah. I think both are good. I think when you come into it is you just don't want to be too strict, because even in the world, when somebody is strict on their kids, once they get out of their household, wild out.
Yeah.
So that's what you don't want. You want people to understand the freedom of God. You want to give them truth and say, okay, this is the reason why God doesn't want sex out of marriage, and this is the reason XYZ, you shouldn't do XYZ.
Yeah.
But you don't harp on it. You know what I'm saying? It's like almost like if your dad told you, Sean, when you was in high school, your curfew is 11 o'clock.
Right.
And you came in late. And he was like, Sean, don't you know that your curfew was 11 o'clock?
Yeah.
And you got it like, okay, Dad, I'm sorry. But if every day when you came down to breakfast, he came down and said, Sean, 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Sean, well, 11 o'clock.
This is what my fiance said. I thought it was really good. When she grew up, and this is how the church can become, you know, you'll see the relation. When she grew up, she didn't do a lot of things wrong, but she realized it wasn't because of God. It was because she didn't want to disappoint her parents.
That's true.
And she realized, it was like, wait a minute, I didn't really do that for God. I did that because I didn't want my dad to be upset with me. Now, that could be a good model for a child, but what happens is the church sometimes becomes your daddy. Yeah. And then you do things inside your church because you don't want to disappoint your church leadership,
Yeah.
and you're not really doing it for Jesus.
And that's funny because I thought about that recently, or sometime I was like, I wonder if people are more scared of getting set down than they are of like disappointing Christ.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if someone found out or something and you like, man,
I don't want to.
I don't want to get sat down. I just need to not tell nobody this situation. Versus, hey, I want to tell you what it is.
Jesus,
yeah.
That's the key, man. Like, and that's a hard balance. And I've seen the issues with both sides. When you have a church that where they make you feel like your first fear is them and not God, that's a dangerous thing, man, because you don't understand why you're doing stuff. You're just doing it not to get repercussions.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is when nobody tells you anything, no truth about anything, and you just live your life up to yourself, that's dangerous too, because you could be going down a path and nobody told you.